In this video, I'm going to explain very briefly how to calculate the proportion of debt and proportion of equity that are often used in calculating the weighted average cost of capital or the cost of capital. So if you remember from my earlier slide, then the cost of capital depends on the sources of capital, right? So I'm making a simplified assumption here. We have two sources of capital, debt and equity. In that case, how do you calculate the cost of capital? Remember the formula: after-tax cost of debt times percent of debt financing, cost of common equity times the percent of common equity financing. So these, like percent of debt financing and percent of equity financing, are usually referred as WACCs, and here I'm going to explain how to calculate them. If you remember from my earlier slide, we usually follow these four general steps in calculating weighted average cost of capital. Step 1, you calculate target capital structure, meaning target percentage of debt and equity. You calculate cost of debt, cost of equity, and finally you put them all together and calculate the weighted average cost of capital. And in this video, I'm just trying to explain you how to calculate the first step, meaning how do you calculate proportion of debt and equity. So let's see how we calculate them in general. This is how we calculate proportion of debt financing, and usually denoted by WD, and is basically the debt over debt plus equity, and proportion of common equity, usually denoted by WE, and is equity over equity plus debt. And in short form, that is also used as E over D plus E, and for the debt, D over D plus E. D refers to debt, E refers to equity. So how do you calculate the debt part? So remember, the debt is always the market value of debt minus cash and cash equivalent, and this is usually we refer as a net debt. We use the net debt because we're trying to figure out the cost of financing for the long run, and we want to focus on the long run debt portion. And how do you calculate the equity part? The equity part basically is the market value of firm's equity. And how do you calculate this? Number of shares over current price of the shares. That's how you calculate the equity. Just to explain this concept, I have borrowed one example, and we want to calculate WACC for 3M company. If the 3M company is trying to raise capital for expansion or some other purpose. Remember, the WACCs are always the target, but we don't know how much cash this 3M company is going to need. So I'm just trying to explain you the concept, like how do you calculate the WACCs if you are trying to find the overall cost of 3M company. And remember from earlier slide, we need the market value of these all the stocks, market cap, and right here, and we have the total cash, and we have the debt. So based on this information, we can easily calculate the WACC. And how we do it? Remember the basic formula, right? So the debt part is the net debt. So you have 11.69 billion as the total debt and 2.68 as the cash. So when you subtract cash from the debt, you have 9.01 billion is the net debt. Keep in mind, we use net debt, and net debt is always equals to your total debt, which includes all the short run versus long run plus the current portion of long run debt minus the cost. That's the net debt. And equity, that's the market value, and you calculate this by number of shares times the stock price, and that's the equity. And debt plus equity is sum of these two is going to be 118.08 billion. So how do you calculate the WACCs then, or the proportion that are used in the calculating cost of capital? Then look at the formula. debt over debt plus equity. You put the number, simplify, it's 7.63% debt weight, and equity is equity over debt plus equity, which is 109.07 over 118.08. It gives 92.37%. What does this mean? This means as of now, the 3M company is using 7.63% of its capital through debt, and the remaining through equity capital. And I have also shown this how to calculate in Excel, which is pretty straightforward. And if you pay close attention here, you can simply use the technique that I just explained, and you can calculate the weights. And this is how you calculate the weights. It's very simple, so I'm not going to spend much time, and thank you.